Hi, I'm Fred Burton with Stratfor, and I'm joined today via Skype with my colleague Scott Stewart. Scott, I don't see a lot of people talking about the explosive vests that were used in Paris. What's your take on them?
Well, it's interesting to see that they chose TATP as an explosive and that they use that rather than some sort of military grade high explosive that they brought in either from the Middle East or the Balkans. So that's telling us that this was material that was probably manufactured in Europe, whether Brussels or in France itself. And it's basically an explosive that can be constructed, using readily available chemicals like, acid, acetone, peroxide. So it doesn't take a lot of complex or hard to obtain materials. That said, it is a difficult explosive to work with. We've seen past cases, like Ramzi Youssef catching himself on fire while making TATP in the Philippines back in January '95. So the fact that we have TATP and the fact that we had such a large quantity of it, showing that it was made in pretty much industrial quantities, and the fact that all the devices functioned as designed is suggesting to us that we either had a professional bomb maker from the Islamic State or someone who was very well trained by one of these professional bomb makers.
And of course, we've seen TATP used here in the United States, haven't we?
Absolutely. Not only have we, seen attempts to use explosive like the shoe bombing, and like the Zazi case. But we even had a case in Oklahoma where we had a university student who attempted to bomb a football game, accidentally detonated a backpack device due to the sensitivity of TATP. TATP, like I said, is finicky, especially once it dries out. The crystals become extremely sensitive to shock, to friction, to static electricity. And so even sitting down with a backpack on your back with those crystals in it when they're dried could set it off.
Well, this tells me that in all probability, the bomb maker that made these vests has had a lot of experience putting these together, don't you think?
Probably. Like I said, it's either someone who's is a professional or someone who was well trained by a professional, and it could have been a French citizen or a Belgian or someone. We still need to wait and see that, but definitely they knew what they were doing. A lot of times, amateur bomb makers struggle not only in making their explosive components, but even making putting the components together into viable devices. We saw that in the Shahzad case. Where he struggled to make a viable device. But here we had devices that all operated, they all functioned. So that's really showing us that whoever did this knew what they were doing.
With the Islamic State threatening Washington, calling for attacks here inside the United States, this is not surprising either to us, is it?
No, it's really not. In fact, we've seen attacks here in the U.S. We had one last October in New York where an Islamic State fanboy attacked, a police officer with a hatchet. We also had the Chattanooga shootings, which was linked to an Islamic State supporter. So the idea that either grassroots jihadis turning fighters, from Syria or Iraq, or kind of a combination of all the above, could conduct an attack here is possible, especially if we're looking at this kind of a simple attack, using an armed assault against a soft target. That's pretty much what we saw, in places like Ottawa, what we saw in Sydney, what we saw in Chattanooga. The difference being, first of all, the explosive vests, but secondly, the number of individuals involved. Having these larger cells operating together as fire teams, especially against a soft target, can be very deadly.
And of course, the Chattanooga attack was just horrific. Can you imagine the carnage if you had multiple shooters like we saw unfold in Paris?
Exactly, and that's a nightmare for police departments too, especially thinking about Paris where you had multiple venues using multiple fire teams, and so it becomes a terrible mess for the law enforcement to respond to because you have multiple active shooter situations. So there are some of the larger police departments in the U.S. that are prepared for that. New York, Los Angeles, but you do worry about these smaller cities. Whether they could handle this type of a multiple assailant or even multiple teams of multiple assailants. It could be overwhelming for smaller departments.
Well, thank you very much for your analysis today, Scott. That's all we have time for. For those of you interested in more information, please visit our website. Thank you.